So let's talk about parasite virulence and do so from a perspective that's helpful towards understanding its evolution. So there are other ways of considering parasite virulence. Of course, there's the whole pathogenicity, the interaction between the parasite and host that's often studied in molecular terms, and we can figure out parasite virulence factors and different ways that the parasite can make the host sick or not make the host sick, or able to evade the host immune system or not. These are not really going to be our emphases. We're going to be speaking yet again in more general terms in order to understand what is going on in terms of a parasite's evolution of greater or lower virulence, where what's important in terms of greater or lower virulence is a combination of the impact on the host health, that is basically what defines the level of virulence, and the impact on the pathogens or the parasite's fitness. So virulence is typically described as the capacity for a parasite or a pathogen to harm a host organism. So in other words, the ability to cause disease or potential to cause disease. Evolutionarily, we would typically describe virulence in terms of host fitness. So in other words, the greater the virulence, the greater the level of disease, the lower the potential for the host organism to ultimately reproduce. This could be because its reproduction is delayed. It could be because its reproduction is reduced because the host organism doesn't have as much body mass as it would have otherwise if it hadn't been sick. It could be because the host is more susceptible to predation by other organisms. It doesn't really matter. What's important is that we are defining the level of impact of the virus on the host in terms of the host fitness. We're defining virulence in terms of its impact on host fitness. The higher the virulence, the less of the potential that the host has to reproduce as a consequence of that disease. The capacity for a parasite to reduce a host's fitness, for example, by debilitating the host or by directly killing the host, therefore is a description of the parasite's virulence. This capacity often can vary from infection to infection or infestation to infestation. This is dependent upon the parasite, it's dependent upon the host, but there's also variation within parasite populations that is genetically based that impacts the degree to which the parasite causes or is able to cause disease in a host organism. Therefore, there is variation in the parasite population. There's phenotypic variation, that is in terms of the level of virulence, and therefore in principle there can be evolution by natural selection acting on that virulence. And if there is a level of virulence that gives rise to a higher potential for the parasite to reproduce and be transmitted to new hosts, then you would expect natural selection to favor that level of virulence. So this variance can be a function of host factors, including host genetics. It can be a function of parasite factors, including parasite genetics. And it also can be a function of environmental factors, things that are outside of the host-pathogen interactions. But together, these factors give rise to some level of virulence that's seen on a per-infection basis. And that level of virulence can vary, at least in part, as a function of parasite genetics, what alleles the parasite carries. Virulence variance, that is variation in the degree of virulence, the degree of disease cause, complicates considerations of virulence evolution, but it's nonetheless consistent with basic evolutionary principles. So what that means is that although we have variance in virulence that's a function of the parasite's genetics, we also have variation in virulence that's a function of other things as well. And therefore, when a parasite enters into a host, there's more than just its own genetics that's impacting the level of disease that's being caused. Nevertheless, in terms of natural selection acting upon the parasite, what's important is the genes, the alleles that the parasite carries, and the extent to which those alleles vary in terms of their impact in an average general sense averaged across infections, their impact on the amount of disease that the parasite is able to cause to the host. That is to say that the Darwinian fitness of a parasite is going to be both context and genotype dependent, both dependent upon the factors outside of the parasite, such as the host genotype and host phenotype, but also the genotype of the parasite itself. And when you have variance in genotype within a population, then evolution can occur.